Hi everyone, welcome to our live stream and thank you for tuning in. My name is Joey and I'm from the community team at Lottie. As we have folks tuning in from across the globe, do give yourself a shout out on the live chat or drop a comment to say hi and tell us where you're from. For those tuning in for the first time, let me start by giving you a quick intro to who we are and what we do. Lottie is a platform for testing, collaborating, and discovering animation for a community of designers and developers. The platform offers a range of tools and features that aim to make the discovery, creation, and implementation of Lottie animations easier and more efficient. There are plenty of ways you can make full use of Lottie. You can use them in your app, website, create a funky Telegram stickers, add them to your games, AR, VR, or even use them for your presentation and ads. There are over 130,000 companies that uses Lottie to ship their animation. Some of them include TikTok, Google, Airbnb, and even Disney. Now, let me share a short video about what Lottie is all about. Please enjoy.
I've got a big fat drum, big fat drum. I've got a big fat drum, pounding so bad. I've got a big fat drum, big fat drum. I've got a big fat, big.
Listen. Yeah. Clap. You ready? Let's go.
We hope you enjoyed that intro. So for today's session, we have Eric, our mobile developer at Lottie. Without further ado, let us welcome our speaker to the stage today, Eric.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, Joey.
Hi, Eric. Would you like to give a short intro before we begin?
All right. So my name is Eric. So I am an Android developer. I am in the mobile team, and I work especially on the Lottie Android mobile app with my teammates at Lottie here.
Thanks, Eric. Could you also share a little bit about what you'll be sharing today?
Oh, great. So during this live session, we will try to cover some interesting topic about how to animate Lottie animation in your Android app. So first of all, we'll try to have a look about how you can animate an animation that you already have in your Android Studio, and you will try to have a look about how you can load an animation using the URL of that animation. We'll try to focus, for example, how you can handle some action like click, like action on Twitter or something like that. And to have an idea, to have further detail about all those stuff that I have presented right now, just stay in the live stream.
Thanks so much, Eric. Seems like there's a lot of demo that you'll be covering. So without wasting any more time, the stage is yours. And folks, feel free to drop your question for Eric on the live chat and he'll get to them at the end of the session. All right, Eric, I'll see you back during the Q&A session.
All right. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, as you already know, today we're gonna demonstrate how to use Lottie animation inside your project, inside your Android project. So as you can see, I have already Android Studio open here. I'm using the latest version of Android Studio. To make sure that we are going to see the same thing, I recommend you to use the latest version of Android Studio. Right now, I'm using Bumblebee. And you may notice that I am using Jetpack Compose. So we are going to use Jetpack Compose during the live stream in order to demonstrate how you can animate, how you can use Lottie animation inside your projects. So before we get started, it's very important to have the right dependency because Lottie animation library, it doesn't come directly inside Android Studio. In order to have that dependency, just go to the grid.build file and try to add this dependency. So the dependency is quite simple. You need just this one. And as I'm using Jetpack Compose, that's the one I've used, Lottie Jetpack Compose animation. So the last version is 5.0.1. So if you have this version, so you will be ready to go. So the dependency is already added. Let me try to sync the project to be sure that the dependency will be downloaded. So it will depend on the internet that you have. If you have a very fast internet, it will download the dependency very quickly. So now everything is set up. So let's go back to our main activity and try to animate our first animation in our Jetpack Compose project. So as you can already see here, there is just a simple Jetpack Compose project and that load just a simple screen here. I have called that Lottie screen. So let's have a look about what there is inside the Lottie screen. You can see that it's just a simple composable here. There is just a column, and the column uses the old space inside the screen, and I have just put the padding, and I have just put here some parameter in order just to be able to put all the content of this column in the middle of the column. Right. So in order to animate a Lottie animation, you need to have that animation. And there is different way that you can use to get a Lottie animation. You have just to go back into lottie.com, lottiefile.com. You can pick up one animation that you need. You can download the JSON file that represents that animation and try to put that inside your project. Or as I will see in a short, you can also pick the URL of that animation and try to animate that. So here I have already have some Lottie animation. I have 3 animations here. Those animations are represented by their respective JSON file here. I have put those animations in the raw folder inside the resource folder. So if you don't have this folder yet, you have just to create that folder by clicking here, and you create just a resource directory and you will be ready to go. As I have already created that directory and I already have the animation, so we can try just to animate the first one. So we try to animate just, for example, this file, the loading.json file. Let's go back to the main activity and see how we can animate that file. So first of all, in order to animate a Lottie file that is present in our project, you need to have a spec. So what is the spec? The spec is an object that holds the reference of the object of the animation that you need to animate. In my case, the loading.json file or like.json file and so on. So for doing that, I have just to create a variable that will hold that object. Spec, and for doing that, I just need the Lottie composition spec, and I have just to specify a raw res. Why do I use raw spec? Because my animation, I have put my animation inside the raw directory. And here you have just to specify the ID of your animation. Res ID, and I will pick up the first one. Now the first one, the last one, the loading.json, or row.Lottie. All right. Here, the spec object holds the reference of the animation that we would like to animate. Okay, great. The first thing that we need to do is a composition. So what is the composition? As you can see here, a Lottie animation, it's just a normal JSON file. And Android Studio or the Android framework can't understand that JSON and try to translate that into an animation. That's why we need a composition. So the composition will be responsible of animate or of rendering the JSON file and translate that into a animation that we can show up in our application. So for creating the composition, just do something like this. I can name the variable composition, and I have just to use a Kotlin syntax here. Remember Lottie composition. As you can see, the Lottie composition composable here take as a parameter the spec. In other words, the reference of the animation that I would like to animate here. Just copy paste this animation here, and we are ready to go. The last thing that I need to have in order to animate, now here I have the reference of the animation that I would like to animate. The second thing that I have is the composition that will be responsible of rendering the animation right here. And the last thing that I need is an object that will allow me to manipulate the state or the progression of the animation. For doing that, let me just create a variable that I will call states. And I will do something like animate Lottie composition as states. And this composable take the composition as the parameter. Now we are whole stuff that we need to do to animate our Lottie animation. So the last thing that we need to do is to add a Lottie composable that will display now the animation into our device. Now, if you try to run the project, you will see that even though I have the reference of my animation, I have the composable, I have the state and so on, but I can still have anything here. My screen still blank, it's still white here. So I need a composable function that will help me to render the animation, to display that animation. In order to do that, you have just to do something like this, Lottie animation, and you will see that this composable require you to provide two information. The first one is the composition that I have already created here. The second one is the progression. So what is the progression? So this library, this Lottie library, can allow you, for example, to manage the progress of a Lottie animation. So the progress is represented by a floating number that can start from 0 to 1. So 0 represents the starting point of the animation, and 1 represents the end point of the animation. So let me pass the composition, and let me pass the progress. The progress is already embedded in the state objects. So in order to have access to that progress, I have just to do something like this, progress, and we are ready to go. So let me try to compile the application right now to see what's gonna happen. And here we go. My animation is loading here. It's fantastic. So as you can see here, the animation just loads once, but sometimes we need something that can repeat several times, for example, twice, 3 times, or to repeat without stopping. Okay, for doing that, we can try to have a look about this function here, this composable function. And you can see that there is a couple of property that you can use. And there is one property that interests me is the iteration. So you can use that property to define how long the animation will iterate. So in that case, by default, as you can see here, is just 1. So it means that the animation will animate just 1 time. And in order to make, for example, I need something like my animation to iterate twice. You can do something like this. 2. Let's try to compile the project, and you will see the animation will take a little time, and after doing 2 iterations, the animation will stop. But sometimes we need something that will animate over and over and over. So you can specify, for example, something like 1000, it can animate, but there is a variable that you can use to specify an animation that will iterate forever. For doing that, you need just to call Lottie constant and use the property iterate forever. So in that case, you can be sure that your animation will load again and again and again without stopping. So for example, in that case, there is a loading animation, so you need that to load forever. So if I try to compile the application, you will see that the animation will load and again. Another use case is, for example, you need to speed up the animation. So for example, this animation is loading slowly, but you really need something that can load very fast. So for doing that, let's have a look about how property that this composable provide to us. You can see that there is a speed property that takes a floating point number. And by default, the value is 1. It means that the 1 is the default speed of our animation. So you can multiply that speed. So for example, you can do something like this, 3, and the animation will speed up 3 times. So for example, if you try to compile the application again, you will see that the animation is a little faster. I can do something like 10 times. Now it's really faster. All right. So there is another thing that can be much more interesting. So for example, so let me try to put the animation to 1, the default speed. Sometimes you will need, for example, not the old progression of the animation. For example, you don't need the animation to start from 0 to 1. So for example, to do a complex iteration, you sometimes, for example, you need something that can be the animation start at some points and stop at the middle. So to illustrate that, let me switch to another animation. So I will pick up the next one, the second one, like animation. Okay. And let's try to do what's gonna happen. Okay. As you can see here, it's a like animation. So let me try to remove that property in order to not allow this animation to iterate forever. Let's try to compile again. All right. As you can see, the animation starts from the beginning and go back to the initial state. But sometimes you can need to have something that the animation stop in the middle. So what you can do that? So let's have a look about which property that you can use inside our composable function here. For doing that, there is a property called clips spec. You can use this property to manipulate the progress of the animation. As I've mentioned earlier, the progress of the animation here is represented by a floating point number. It means that 0 represents the starting point of the animation and 1 represents the end of the animation. So for example, here I can remove this and put, for example, 0. You will see that nothing gonna happen because I have blocked my animation to its initial state. And if I replace that with 1, you will see that the animation it's not animating. Why? Because I have removed this property that animates my animation. But sometimes you can do something like to, what can I say, to animate to deal with the progress of the animation. For doing that, let me use the spec, the clip spec property, Lottie clip spec, and you have just to call the object's progress. So as you can see here, the progress has 2 variables. The first one is the minimum value, and the next one is the maximum value. By default, whole animation has the minimum 0 and the maximum 1. So in that case, I can just restore my progress here, it means that the animation will start from the beginning till the end, as you can see here. But sometimes, if I want, for example, the animation to stop in the middle, I can just put something like 0.5, and you can see that the animation stop in the middle. And you can manipulate this variable here just to have an idea about to handle the progress of the animation. And you can manipulate those variables dynamically to have a full control of the progress of your animation. So another use case that is very interesting is, for example, you don't have the animation stored in your Under Studio projects, but you have just the URL of that animation. So what you can do that? So let me pick up one URL of the animation. So I have some URL here. And here I have the specification here that contain the reference of our animation. As you can see, the raw race here, the race ID is an integer, but I have a URL of the animation, and a URL is a string. For doing that, you can just change the specification by using something like URL. And this one take the URL of my animation here. And what's gonna happen? The Lottie library will download this animation and play that locally inside my projects. So let's compile the project to see what's gonna happen. As you can see, it's this wonderful animation. So let me try to make that animation to iterate forever, just to have a look about how it's. No, it's a Lottie constant forever. Now here it's the speed iteration. Let's see what the property that we need is this one. Yes. Iteration, Lottie constant, and forever. And let's try to compile the project again to see what's gonna happen. As you can see, it's a really interesting animation, and you can see that is very, very fast because I didn't play the animation from starts till the end, because I've specified 0.2 instead of 1. So let me put 1 just to animate the animation from start to beginning. All right, this is awesome. Okay, so another use case that is very interesting. So let me go back to my live animation here. Row, race ID. Okay, this one. And I just want to show you another use case. So here, my progress, the progress of my animation is handled by this composable. The Lottie state, as you can see, this composable return an object of type Lottie animation state. And it means that this composable is responsible of taking my animation from 0 to 1. But sometimes it can be interesting to handle this progress manually. For doing that, I have just to create a slider. First of all, I have just to create a variable that will contain the progress of my animation, progress. And let me create a state, a simple state. It's initialized to 0 by default. And here, instead of using the progress provided by this function here, I can just use this one. And let me put a slider that will help me, for example, to manipulate the progress of my animation dynamically. In Jetpack Compose, you need just to call the slider, and the slider require you two values. The first one is the value that you need to change the current value is 0, but the slider can change this value automatically from 0 to 1. And let me just put this value here. And every time the value change, I have just to update the variable in order to update the progress. Okay, so it means that every time I try to move my slider, the new value will be updated, will update the progress variable, and that progress variable, as is in Jetpack Compose, it's a state, it will recompose the UI and my animation will play again. So let me try to compile this up to see what's gonna happen. As you can see, there is a slide here. If you try to move, you will see that I can manage, I can deal with the progress of my animation without looping the animation forever. So it's a use case that can be interesting in your case, depending of the use case, depending of what application that you are trying to build. So let me just showcase the latest use case that is very interesting is, for example, when it comes to animate, what can I say? The action. So for example, when you try to like a tweet, you can see there is a kind of animation that is quite similar to this one. But let me just try to showcase that out by switching back to the last animation here, like V2. And instead of using this slider, let me go back to this one, progress. Let's compile and see what's gonna happen. Okay, we'll try to implement something like that. So it means that when the user click on the animation, we show something like that. So you can incorporate those kind of animation in your application when, for example, a user must add something to their favorite or something like that. So let's see what we can animate so we can have some kind of logic in our application. So first of all, we need to have to animate the progress here. Instead of animating that using a slider, we'll try to animate that with something that is already integrated in Jetpack Compose. We need to animate a float. Animate float has. And this composable requires us a target. So what is a target? So a target, it means that this value, that this float that we need to animate will start from one point and will reach some target. So in our case, I need to put a second variable here. For example, let me call that is like. And by default, the state is false. So what's gonna happen? If the user like, so it means that this property is like is true, my target will be 0. No, will be 1 if I like. So it means that the animation must start from 0 to 1. And if it's not like, we have just to go back to 0. This is our target. So if the animation is like, what's gonna happen? This composable will handle that for us. And another thing that I need to do is to put, for example, the animation spec. In our case, I will just put this twin that can help me, for example, to, what can I say, to deal with the animation. So I can change the specification of how the animation. So it's not mandatory, but I want just to put that. It can help me to control the speed of the variation of my progress here. So let's have a look what's going on here. Okay, we are ready to go. And here, instead of using the progress that's coming from here, I will just use this one, progress. And I want just to make my Lottie animation here clickable. So it means that every time the user will try to click on that animation, we'll just switch back to switch just this variable from false to true and so on. For doing that, in Jetpack Compose, you can use modifier and use something like clickable. And you need to call the onClick property here. So what's gonna happen when the user click? If like is true, we have just to switch to false and so on. So let's see what's gonna happen now by compiling our app. So now the animation, it's not showing at all because as you can see, when the progress of this kind of animation that I put right now is 0, the animation is not showing up. But when I click, as you can see, it animates quite faster. And when it's behavior a little more strange, let's try to see how we can improve that. The first thing that I need to do is, for example, to remove that ripple effects that appear every time I try to click that animation. For doing that in Jetpack Compose, you need something like to put the indicator to null and use something like interaction. Okay, so by doing that, we can be sure that we're gonna remove the ripple effects every time we click. So let's see what's gonna happen now. So now when I click, there is no ripple, but the animation is still not loading as I can expect. And you can see that it's loading very, very fast. And I need to manage how Jetpack Compose will modify this variable from 0 to 1. I can put the duration here, for example. You have to handle, it's a way to say, for example, I have to put this animation from 0 to 1 in 1 second. Let's try to see what's gonna happen. It's beautiful right now. Great. Okay. As you can see, when the animation reach the target, it means 0, you can see that the animation disappear. So let me try to click again. When the animation it disappear when this variable, this value reach 1. So what can I do? I can manage the progress here. Instead of reaching 1, it can just something like 0.8. Let's see what's gonna happen. Now, when I click, it's quite beautiful. All right. Now we have our like button that is reacting as we expect. So it's a beautiful example of what different use cases that you can use in order to animate your Lottie animation in your app. So you can use this simple logic. So here we don't longer need this stuff. So it can be useful to have this stuff, for example, when it's come to animate your animation forever. But in our case, I need just something that will react to the user interaction. For example, when the user click the button or click again the button and so on. And let's try to click again to see what's gonna happen. So it's a beautiful animation, isn't it? Right. So there is a lot of use cases that you can use using this Jetpack Compose library for animating Lottie animation. But I can't cover all those types in just one live stream. I hope we will have another session where we can try to go even further. But there is a lot of use case that you can use with that library. You can modify the color of that animation programmatically. You can do a lot of stuff just by using this Lottie animation library. And you don't need to manipulate or to go back to your JSON file and try to modify that, to manipulate. The library will handle that for you. And I hope that this live stream will be the starting point for you to start your journey by adding your animation, by adding Lottie animation inside your mobile projects. So I think it's all for that live stream. So I think we can switch back to Joey.
Thanks, Eric, for all the demos. I hope everyone had fun learning as well with all the things you can do with Lottie animations on your Android app. Right. So now it's time for Q&A. If you have any questions for Eric, please drop them on the live chat and we will get to them. And Eric, before that, we do have some folks who submit their question during the RSVP. So I'm going to show one right now.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yep. They're asking
is an
if they
interesting
can
question.
use Lottie animation in Flutter.
Yeah, it's possible. It's a very interesting question. And yes, it's possible to use a Lottie animation inside your your Flutter project. There is already a package that can be found on the Flutter package management's website that you can use. You have just to integrate that package inside your Flutter project, and you can have the same feature that I have tried to demonstrate here. So it's a quite similar library, even though the library is written in Dart, and right now we have done our demonstration in Kotlin, but it's possible, and that package can allow you to handle all those stuff.
Thanks, Eric. We hope that answered your question. And Eric, we do have some questions coming in on the live chat. Could you take a look and see which one you want to get to first?
Okay, I have the first one from Heath. Is the animation played from URL cached? Yeah, that is an interesting question. Yes, it's possible. So it means that every time you load your Lottie animation from the URL, the library will cache that animation locally. So it means that every time you will try to load that animation again, the library will not download that animation again, because your application can be much more expensive in terms of connection or something like that. And so, yes, the library can cache the Lottie animation inside your project just in terms of performance.
Thanks, Eric. Is there another one that you'd like to pick up?
Yeah, I think there is another question. It's possible to add animation on Composible with Lottie file. For example, adding animation to test Composible, because it seems like you deal with local or remote assets. This is an interesting question. So I think the question is related to how to animate something like text. So it's possible. You can go to the lottify.com. You can see that there is, you have the possibility to animate text. So you can create an animation with, what can I say, a specific text, and you can put that animation inside your project and you can animate that properly. So it's possible, and you can even change the color of that animation using this library.
Thanks, Eric. We hope that answered your question. Unfortunately, we do not have time left for the live stream. We do have more questions, but do keep them coming, and we can definitely share it with you on our social channel and even on the YouTube channel. Before we wrap this up, Eric, any final words for our audience today?
So I have one or two. The first one, in order to get started with all those stuff, animation with using Lottie, I will recommend you to download our Lottie mobile app on iOS or on Android, so you can have an idea about which kind of animation that you can add inside your project. There are a ton of free animation that you can integrate inside your project for free. And you can have a look on our blog posts. There is a ton of article, ton of blog that can allow you, for example, to getting started with Lottie animation inside not only the mobile app, but for web and so on.
Thanks, Eric. I know we said that the time is up, but it looks like there is a very interesting question on the live chat. Do you think we have time to answer that?
Yes.
All right. So
Okay.
Can I use this library also for watch faces for Android watches?
Yes, it's possible. Why it's possible? Because right now, Jetpack Compose supports Android Watch. So the system that Google developed for watches. So Jetpack Compose can be used. So it means that you can use the same dependency, the same logic that I've used here to animate your Lottie file inside a watch application.
All right, I promise that's the last one. So thank you so much, Eric, for all your time. I'll be moving you backstage now to wrap up the event. We hope to see you soon for the next live stream.
Bye.
All right, thank you everyone once again for tuning in. We hope you had a great time. If you like to rewatch this session, you can find the recording on the Lottie Files social channel listed here. The team has a lot more live stream coming your way, and we'll be going live again on March 11 for a Ask Me Anything About Motion session. We'll also be dropping the link to that event in the live chat. Lastly, we would love to hear your feedback about this live stream. We'll also be selecting a few lucky winners from the submission to receive some cool Lottie File swags. So don't forget to include your email address in the feedback form to stand a chance to win. Also, if you're interested to be part of our Lottie community initiative to host awesome live streams like today, or even be a speaker at one, you can state your interest in the feedback form. With that said, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we hope to see you again real soon.